ghostly mark. Cobwebs twine and shadows dance in this twilight somber trance. Candles flicker, weary wicks, ancient echoes, time's cruel tricks. Marble figures, frozen pose, amidst the silence sorrow grows. Whispering shadows, secrets keep in the depths where night meets sleep. Underneath the velvet gloom, guardians of the haunted room. Chandeliers and crystal tears reflect forgotten yesteryears, softly chanting distant cries. Through the arches sorrow sighs. Gargoyles watch with stony gaze, guardians of endless maze. Pipe organ's breath begins to rise, filling air with mournful ties. Whispering shadows, secrets keep in the depths where night meets sleep. Underneath the velvet gloom, guardians of the haunted room.
Good afternoon, everybody. With any luck, OBS is behaving itself. I'm Lady Red of the Black Pants Legion, and we're here to talk about some nonsense. I'm sure you'll let me know if things aren't working. How is everybody today?
I'm doing fine. I know you're not asking me, but I'm doing fine.
I'm not asking you. I don't have you live yet, but I will turn your mic on. Hi, Aiden. How are you?
I was answering a question and nobody could hear me, and now I'm sad.
Happy Valentine's. Love you.
Ooh, happy Valentine's to you as well. Also, thank you, Toon JD, for the sub. 5 months now? Nice.
Very, very nice. I'm glad you're doing okay. We've got Lichter with us as well. It's lovely to see you making it. And Tyre German, who is often here. Samurai, Grimos, Ramshackle, a lot of the usual faces. Very pleased to see you all here.
Usual suspects.
Is the volume any better? Somebody said I was a little bit quiet. If not, I can bring it up some more. So far, so good. Sitting down to make a Centurion unhappy with being hit with LRMs. Yep. Centurions are generally unhappy with being hit by LRMs. It's good. Bring it up another notch. Okay, I'll bring it up just a tiny bit, and I'm also going to see about putting just a little bit of background music in behind us. So let's do that. And
Oh no,
there
Quinn.
we go.
I'm sorry to hear that. No bronchitis.
Okay. Oh no, bronchitis is not nice at all. I wish you a very speedy recovery. Very, very speedy.
Bronchi tubes need to not have the sick.
100% agree. And a happy Valentine's Day to everybody in chat. I really appreciate you all being here. For those of you who have plans, I hope they go well today. For those of you who don't, I hope you have a wonderful, chilled out day. we're going to talk about some nonsense, and I'm going to ruin that day. So, you might want to leave because going to talk about Twilight today. Have you guys heard of Twilight? You know about Twilight? You're not allowed to grumble because why don't you tell chat why the hell I know about Twilight?
Okay, so among our off-stream friend circle, the missus here, Lady Red, has for quite some time done a book club weekly where it started out reading, I believe it was legal nonsense and silly pamphlets from very, very colorfully awful individuals.
I will cut in
then
here with why this started. So yeah, I run a book club. It's you can carry on in a moment. It's on hiatus at the moment because this year is a crazy year, but I do run a book club for my close personal friends, and this all started when we were first moved down to Florida with a book whose title you guys just have to hear because it's ridiculous. The book I read to them as the first one we ever did was called Why I Sued Taylor Swift and Became Falsely Known as Litigious and Crazy by Russell Greer, and is still possibly one of the most ridiculous and self-entitled books I've ever read.
It was an acid trip trying to get through that. So, after sharing that fever dream of a publication with her friends, it's continued onward, and it's kind of pinballed between reading really good books. A lot of Terry Pratchett, for example, comes to mind, because Sir Terry Pratchett is a wizard with words. And on the other hand, some really bad books. You've heard us mention Handbook for Mortals a couple times. That was the most recent terrible offering.
We're going to be talking about that today too.
I'm sure we are, and it's going to hurt me. But as kind of punishment for some of the horrible things she introduced us to when she asked for ideas, we kind of twisted her arm and are like, you should read Twilight, because one of the things we enjoy about the bad book experience is the fact that she can barely make it half a paragraph before going off on a tirade, because how dare these books be so bad. So yeah, she's read the entirety
Twilight,
of the
though,
book.
was the worst of those. I couldn't get past 2 lines before I went off on a rant.
Oh, yeah.
Twilight
So-
took us longer than any other book because it was just so bad.
So not only has she read the book, she read it out loud for an audience and did so while providing real-time critique. And I use the term critique loosely. It was mostly just angry ramblings. The best kind of ramblings.
So, I'd like to talk a little bit about my experience with Twilight, because a lot of people like Twilight, a lot of people hate Twilight, and I think both of those are actually valid. The thing I hate the most about Twilight is the fact that it's aimed at an impressionable audience and gives really bad relationship advice. That's the thing that I genuinely have an issue with and will always have an issue with, and I don't think that book should just be given to people of the, appropriate age group without any, any sort of oversight from a more mature figure in their lives. That's where the problem lies, but everything else around that really isn't as egregious as it can sometimes be made out. And there is... Go on.
I want to interrupt and say that I know that's not the only reason why you don't like it, because I'm reading up the conversation I'm having in the side with Tired German, and it's very similar to the both of us. Getting into Hellsing, Vampire the Masquerade.
See, those are reasons I personally don't like it, but they're not reasons why I have a genuine concern about the book.
Fair.
Twilight is one of those polarizing things where you've got your fanatics on one side who absolutely adore it, and Stephanie Meyer could do no wrong, and you've got really fanatics on the other side who will take everything that's wrong with it and take it up to a spicy 11 for why this book should be burned at the stake, and you don't need to go that far either. It is a bad book. Objectively, Twilight is a bad book. It is not well written. That you can dissect it for days, which I did with you guys. But the only real true harm in it is its relationship depictions and the influence that can have on the intended audience. Everything else I dislike about it isn't an active threat, and there is a lot to dislike. But there is something positive that can be said about Stephanie Meyer as well, and that is that she has always said that she's just very happy that people gelled with her writing, and she's never been one of these people who rejects critique. She doesn't necessarily listen to critique or internalize any of it or make use of any of it, but she doesn't actively go against the people that criticize her. And I think that's a really important thing that I don't hate Stephanie Meyer. I despise her book. It's bad. And I do think it's got some actual general issues behind it. But as a person, I don't think she's the worst person. If you want a bad, and I mean bad story, look up My Immortal. We did that for Halloween, and I love My Immortal, and we'll hear nothing bad against it, you prep. Get out of here. You don't belong here. I love My Immortal because either one, it is the greatest troll fic ever written for the time period it came out to have lasted this long, or two, it was the genuine interest of a very displaced 14-year-old girl who was figuring out her place in the world, and I embraced the cringe. There was some real charm to My Immortal. I love My Immortal.
Samurai was asking earlier when you were going to do a live reading of it. I'm like, you missed it by a couple years.
Yeah, I've already done it. And not only did I read My Immortal to my book club.
Oh my god, I forgot about this part.
I dressed up for it. I bought the wig, I got the nails, I did the makeup. It was amazing.
Oh, it was painful. Also, Wilf, is Twilight better or worse relationship advice than Romeo and Juliet? I'd say worse in several ways, though Romeo and Juliet's still pretty bad. Just putting it out there.
The difference there is purely on the intent of the author. If Stephanie Meyer had written Twilight just for herself and some close friends, I'd have literally zero issues with it, because everybody has the right to write anything they want to for any purpose. Things only change once you decide that you want an audience. Once you decide that you want an audience, you then have a commitment to respect that audience. And that's where the issues with Twilight come in. I don't have those issues with Romeo and Juliet because it's not supposed to be taken seriously. And that's a fault of modern society. When Shakespeare wrote that, he was poking fun at the idiocy of teen love. You're not supposed to walk away from it thinking it's genuine relationship advice or a tragedy. It's not. It's a comedy of how stupid teenagers are.
Kind of like a lot of slasher movies. Also, High Lord points it out. This kind of reflects what you're saying. Swap the genders of Bella and Twinkles, and suddenly the entire story is something horrifying.
So,
I'm gonna make the comment: it's horrifying already without having to do that. For one, and for two, they did it.
Yeah, she did that.
She did it.
But that book, I would say, is not the one that makes things horrifying. And to talk about that, I have to sort of talk about the experience of going through Twilight. Because this is where Stephanie Meyer is slowly losing that sort of grace that I give her, is the more that she continues to milk the series, which in itself, fine, whatever, get that bag. If there's still a rabid audience for it, in concept I don't have an issue, but the things that she does with her work concern me, and start building on that genuine issue I have, which is to do with relationships. Because as we all know, as mature people with at least 2 brain cells between the entire lot of us to rub together, Twilight's not a great story, and it's definitely not a good love story. There's been immeasurably worse since, and that's what I really want to talk about, is the legacy of Twilight and some of the things that have come from it.
Oh, Jesus.
But it's not good. Edward is... Some of the core problems with Twilight as a romance story comes from the background that the author is familiar with, growing up as a rather sheltered Mormon lady. and the concept of fate. Because the only way that this sort of fated love story, where Edward's in love with Bella because she's just inherently good, and she's in love with him because he's got this sort of old worldness to him as well as the other world, and etc. And he's very alluring, and they're fated to be together. Well, the problem with that is he's 130 odd in the book. So the only way that this fated love story could possibly have happened is if he became a vampire, which kind of endorses that that's God's plan. That the only way that this fated love can happen is if murder happens to facilitate it. And when you start reading into the sort of unintentional subtext of Edward being sired before Esme and the relationships between the different Cullens, it starts getting really weird. But yeah, Edward had to die for this romance to even happen in the first place, which is a problem. He's 130 odd, she's 17. And then it gets made worse when Stephanie Meyer decided that she needed some more money and she wanted to feed the fan base, and she was going to rewrite the original book from Edward's perspective and use that to both give Bella a personality patch that really didn't work, but also because she decided to focus on scenes that she really should have glossed over. She has this moment where she focuses on the scene where Edward is talking to one of the receptionists or admin people at the school because he doesn't want to have to be in Bella's classes anymore. This is fairly close to the beginning of the book where he's, oh my god, can't deal with being around this person, need to change everything, and of course, he can read minds. So we get from Edward's perspective, him talking to this 30-year-old plus woman about wanting to change his classes, and we are seeing from his perspective her internal thoughts about how hot this student she thinks is 17 is, and he's still 130, and it's just really, really, really weird and not in a good way. And I don't know why we needed that. There was absolutely no reason to include the fact that the admin lady thought Edward was hot. That just made everything creepy. Parallax says, I'd like to point out we can't really blame the Mormons for her naive and dumb about the world when sad. Yeah, that's very true. I'm not trying to say all Mormons, create this sort of sheltered, don't really understand how the rest of the world sees things. But I do feel like being sheltered and raised in the Mormon faith has had some influence on the things that she finds important. Those are still, though, her experiences and not universal to all Mormons. Yeah, hashtag not all Mormons. Quite so. Quite so.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, every writer is impacted by their environment. That is completely true, and that's one of the things that can make writing great, is that you bring on board, the things that you know, and they do say write what you know. If you bring a little bit of yourself and your experiences into everything that you're writing and doing, it helps to add that weight of authenticity. But as we talked about a few weeks ago, if you're going to write about something, you do, for an audience at least, you do have something of a due diligence to at least do some degree of research for things that you don't know about, that you want to make an important part of the story that you're telling, the connection that you're trying to make. And there's a part of me that almost respects the idea of, I didn't want to read established vampire lore because I wanted to write something new and unique. That's great. But there's a vast difference between new and unique and making something that has no relevance to the name you're giving it, but using that name anyway. Because she didn't really write vampires. That's not really what's going on in Twilight. They're slightly aggressive butterflies more than anything.
Butterflies.
I mean, they are, because some butterflies, very, very, very occasionally drink blood because they need the salt content, etc. They land on carrion, and it helps them continue their migratory path, and they have the sparkly wings, etc. So
it should be noted as an aside, I'm doing my best to get Puppy Cam up and running because this is some kind of stuff, and puppies help digest it better, but they've all migrated to the crate, and it's dark in there.
Sleepy puppies. I'm sure they'll wake up at some point during all of this, though.
Yeah.
So, my experience of reading Twilight was a very complex one because, of course, Twilight's set up in Washington State. And what I imagine chat probably doesn't know is that Washington State is where Aiden and I call home. We haven't been there for a long time because orders sent us down to Florida, but we are planning to return this year. And Stephanie Meyer's version of Washington State and the reality that I lived are very different things. So there was some ranting while we were reading through that.
Would you like, by the way, a glass of wine while you try and relive this experience?
No, it is far too early in the day for alcohol. I do appreciate the offer, though.
Fair.
Tired German has returned from cocktail mixing. That's probably a wise thing to do. I am also noting...
That's what inspired me to comment.
Yeah, the discussions about Hellsing and Hellsing Abridged. Obviously, Hellsing is my favourite anime. Hellsing Abridged, with the exception of the last 2 episodes, was just pitch perfect. And I basically agree with what's going on in chat. So, we read through Twilight, and one of the issues that I had with it is the Washington that's described in it feels to me very much like sitting up against the bottom of the Cascade Mountains, because the area that Aiden and I live in, we live on one of the islands on the Puget Sound, and it is beautiful there. It does not rain that often. When it does, it's for like 30 minutes and then it blows over, and it is stunning up there. You have all of these ancient forests with ferns, and you know in enchanted fantasy stuff where you see the light beams coming through the trees, landing on the lovely red mushrooms, and the trees are all these stark colors against dark rock. Well, it's real.
Very Disney movie.
It's very Disney movie, but it's real. And it's beautiful up there. So having Bella constantly shit talk this place I absolutely adore, that initially got on my nerves. The relationship got on my nerves. The fact that not a single character was believable got on my nerves. And this led to us writing a much better romance story as we went along.
Oh my god, yes.
Because we very quickly realized that the only character that any of us could gel with was Charlie, the father, who... he's just a sweetheart. He's lovely. And we decided that what we really needed was for Twilight to be a buddy cop movie about Charlie, who, and retired... What's the name of Jacob's grandfather or whatever?
I have no idea. I refuse to remember these details. But yeah, the grandfather werewolf was the police dog.
We decided that was clearly what was going on, is that Charlie used to have a thing for the grandfather who was his canine unit, and they had a falling out, and now the unification of the dumbass Edward and the dumbass Bella starts to bring these characters back together, and Senior Cullen, the dad, was the one that drove them all apart. And we wrote a much more compelling buddy cop story, and it was fabulous. It was absolutely fabulous, and that was how we got through this book, because...
It was something, that's for sure.
Oh my god. I struggled with Twilight. And I didn't just struggle with it because Bella hates Washington, the prose was very pedestrian, the description of native peoples was frankly concerning, the relationships...
By concerning, you mean actually offensive?
Yes, the relationships were concerning. We had a huge rant at one point about the fact that the Cullens occasionally hunted bears and mountain lions. Endangered species...
Also, the way they did it, it's like, okay, we're going to wait till the bear is at its absolute weakest, and then we're just going to torture the poor beast before we kill it. It's like, wow, dude, you're a big man, aren't you?
That spawned a good half-hour rant that we went on with that.
Yeah.
So we went through all of that. There was the issue with the house, which somebody mentioned just while stream was starting up, that Lego has released the Cullen house. Now, I'd like to point out, it's inaccurate, because the prose in the book describes the house as white, not brown. The form of the house is, it's a very modern design, which does match what's in the book and does match what some people build up there. and makes me very sad because Washington State has a lot of Dutch influence in it. So you've got a lot of European style building up there, which is just absolutely beautiful. And it's nice to go to different areas. It's one of the things I've enjoyed about moving to the States is I've literally crossed the States multiple times. I've lived in different states in the Union, and the architecture changes as you go across such large distances can be really charming and engaging. And obviously I really like Washington because it's got hints of my homeland built in. It's got European architecture, and that's really nice. So seeing these just horrible, soulless, modern buildings going up does make me very sad. But we really did struggle with the book, with the whole, yes, the house is white and lots of it is glass, which, one, makes no sense if vampires live here. Why would you even do that? I thought you guys were trying to be low-key and hide. Why would you decide that half your house needs to be glass walls? Two, we couldn't figure out where exactly the piano was placed inside this house because none of the descriptions made sense. And three, white is a terrible colour for a house in Washington State, especially if you are close to the Cascades. Because it rains a lot, and there's a lot of moss up in Washington State. Your house will not stay white for more than 6 months. You'll be lucky if you get that far. So we had issues with it. So the fact Lego made it brown, it's not correct. It's more sensible. Good job, Lego.
Hello, Chandu. Welcome.
Oh, you've chosen a heck of a stream to join us on.
We're going to be having a good long bitch session about Twilight. It's terrible writing. It's even worse legacy, and then we're going into actual, attempt at good things in the form of, the community-driven world building that we have been doing the past few weeks. So settle in. And Hal's clearly has opinions here. Hal's
has correct opinions here.
I'm gonna have to ask him to give me both barrels at some point about what he really thinks.
Eastern Washington resident here. The tourists were a nightmare. I can well imagine that they were. What is Samurai showing us? That did not go to where it was supposed to go to.
Yeah, no, that did not work, Samurai. Thoughts on the power system of Twilight? No, we don't have any.
So that is. I do have thoughts on the power system of Twilight, but I know what you're getting at. Twilight suffers from Deus Ex Machina syndrome. The characters can do what they can do at the moment that the story demands it of them because Stephanie Meyer isn't a good writer. She just isn't. As I've said, I don't hate her other than the really weird relationship stuff, but she simply does not understand the craft, which I'm not an expert either. I didn't go to school for this. I'm just passionate about writing because I like books, I like stories, they're important. But equally, I would never try and put my work out there without putting it through a decent editor first, because, that's what you should do. But she can't write, so she didn't sit down, and I personally feel like she never planned these books out. When she sat down to write the original Twilight, she was just writing what she personally wanted to write for her, which is fine. I will never criticize anyone for doing that. As I've always said, it only changes once you decide that you are going to put your words in front of an audience. That's when the responsibilities shift and change, and I personally feel you then have something of a duty that you are expected to adhere to as a writer. And she doesn't do those things. So I don't feel like she sat down and really thought about the character arcs that her characters have, because basically they don't have any. She didn't sit down to think about what the stakes of the story were, because basically there aren't any. The stakes that are added in are very unnatural and come about as a result of wanting to try and drive forwards the world's most bland romance. And as a result, of course, the powers therefore don't matter. Characters can do what they need to do in the moment, and this is particularly seen with her name's gone out of my head. The sister vampire that has precognition. Is it Alice?
Oh yeah,
Alice?
I don't. Again, I've burned the remembrance of these names
Yes,
out of my
I
brain
have
meat.
tried to, but her
Because-
power set in particular is so ill-defined and categorically changes in what she can and can't do from book to book. She's terrible. She's absolutely terrible. I mean, even Edward is not, you know, a particularly strongly written powers-wise character, and his is the most defined and most consistent. It's also one of the worst choices that you can have. Mind reading is a really, really, really difficult thing to work with.
Device. It's a really hard plot device to
I'm
use.
sorry, Lichter. That's the result of me turning the mic up for chat. Is unfortunately it is now also picking Aiden up again.
Conveys the emotion more powerful. I might need to have you ride shotgun on my Thursday streams then for the funsies.
Mary
the
Sue
cop-out
syndrome.
character that's used
Yeah,
for
cop out
what-
character. Yeah, and this story does have Mary Sue syndrome, and there are times where I don't mind Mary Sueism. I have made the comment that I love My Immortal. It has a special place in my heart, and that's because of where My Immortal comes from. Mary Sue's in things like Twilight I absolutely abhor, because it's not a 14-year-old trying to discover who they are and their place in the world. It's somebody trying to make money selling actual novels to a fully fledged audience through a publishing house, and that's a very different can of worms.
It's one girl's choice between necrophilia and bestiality is what it is.
And if you want to read that, the Anita Blake series by Laurel K. Hamilton is the better choice. Now, I'm not saying that the Anita Blake series deserves awards. It doesn't. I really like the first book. The series kind of slowly goes downhill from there, as many series do, but it does it knowingly, and I have a lot more respect for Laurel K. Hamilton as an author who has a respect for her audience and knows what they want, versus Stephanie Meyer, who genuinely thinks that Edward and Bella are a good couple. They're not. They are really, really not. I can imagine you do, Blackfire, especially as you get further through the series. I have never read the series to the end. I think the last book I read was Micah, or one or two after it, I can't remember, and then I emigrated and I don't have access to my books anymore. So I'm sure you have opinions. I'm sure they are much more informed opinions than mine, but if I have to choose between reading Twilight or Guilty Pleasures, I'm going to read Guilty Pleasures. It's immeasurably better, and the world building is more consistent, the characters have arcs, there's actual stakes in the story. I would read that one any day of the week. Speaking of Mary Sue's, the only story I ever read that dealt with the Mary Sue character somewhat tastefully was this. Ensign Sue Must Die. Is that a Star Trek thing? Because if it is, that's very interesting, because that's where the term Mary Sue comes from. Yes, it is. That is where Mary Sue comes from, is from the Star Trek community. That's why that term exists.
I did not know that.
Yes. This started from way back in the 80s, with people writing fan fiction for Star Trek and somebody self-inserting a character called Mary Sue, and that's where we get that from.
Oh, okay. The more you know.
The stuff that's going on the screen that the schedule flipper is going over, that's where I've got that. You're not missing anything as yet, and I will shift things about on the screen when we start doing things with Scrivener. Right now, I'm afraid you guys are just stuck listening to me rant about terrible, terrible books.
So we've gone on about how Twilight is bad, but I know you were wanting to move on to kind of the legacy of, because we've already discussed that it's a book about a stalker, for one. The dude watches the girl sleep from her bedroom window. It houses very, very eloquently put it that it is horrible relationship advice that did harm to impressionable young girls. But Twilight is maybe the thing that it started this, but it's certainly not the worst. And I know you've got a couple that you want to bring up.
I do, and some of them you've unfortunately had to sit through. So I'm just going to catch a couple of things in
see
chat
you
first.
suffer in the process.
You
so
did.
It was worth
You
it.
did. You did. Somebody was saying that the term Mary Sue gets thrown around too freely and often for characters that people just don't like or is shorthand for badly written women. I agree with all of that. A Mary Sue is somebody who is just too perfect all the time, and they're the super special one. They have powers other people don't, and everything always goes a certain way, and any flaws that they have aren't really flaws, which we see this turn up in the legacy of Twilight. So that's going to come up. But yeah, badly written women can just be badly written. They don't have to be Mary Sues to be that, and not all characters that you just don't like are Mary Sues. It does have a specific meaning, but these things do sort of bleed over time. I'm not going to talk about Omegaverse Rail because one, I will go apoplectic and people will die because, oh my god, I have opinions and just... Also TOS, so we're not going to do that. We are going to touch lightly on Shades of Grey because, of course, that's where this problem started, is you had Twilight. You had somebody who read Twilight and started writing fan fiction for it, which they then morphed into their own thing, which became 50 Shades and cashed in on Twilight. And unfortunately, we now live in the post 50 Shades of Grey world, where Twilight, at the time where it was at the height of its fandom and hatedom, was, you know, the worst love story people really had their hands on at the time.
Okay, hold up.
What?
Samurai, that was bad and you should feel bad. I see what you did there. You don't think that one flew under the radar, you monster. We have Rail here. He's the Pundertaker. Don't join him. That is the path to the dark side.
But the world we live in now is, unfortunately, Twilight's become kind of middle of the road for young adult romance fiction. 50 Shades you should absolutely be mad at. 50 Shades took the problems, you know, the genuine problem that I had with Twilight, which was exemplifying bad relationships to impressionable people, and just turned that up to a spicy 11. It is not representative of the communities that it discusses. It is inherently an unhealthy relationship, and E.L. James writes even worse than Stephanie Meyer does, which is impressive. What I would like to talk about with regards to that legacy and following through from 50 Shades, because I'm not going to say anything about 50 Shades that people haven't heard before. I'm sure I haven't said anything about Twilight you guys haven't heard before, but E.L. James wanted to be a writer before she made 50 Shades. She was working on a story that she put on hold to write 50 Shades, which then made her famous, and then she wrote all the other 50 Shades stuff with Absolute Wet Blanket, Anastasia Steele, and then she went back to her original project, which I feel is much more interesting to talk about because it's more egregious, and I think it gives us a better insight into just what a poor writer E.L. James is. And that book that she released was called The Mister, which was followed by a sequel called The Misses, and really shows off bad writing. Now, thankfully, this is one that Aiden hasn't had to sit through and probably never will.
I have a question before we really break into this. I know that we have representatives from multiple continents in chat. I want to ask, with all curiosity, has anyone in chat either lived or visited Albania before? Just, you know, it will be relevant. It will be relevant.
My sister did a tour in Albania. Okay. So,
I want you to keep...
Is anybody here familiar with The Mister? Uh-oh, Night Owl said your name. You're in trouble now.
Uh-oh. Only seen it from the coast of Greece. So, visited AI, but not Albania. Visit Al. Brought you back an Albanian Zippa. Okay, so I'm assuming you're... No, we're not starting a war with Albania. Admittedly, I am predisposed against them because they didn't sell their air force to the Legion like we wanted them to. But okay, Quinn knows.
We're going to
people
be
from
nice to
Albania.
Albania this week. We're going to be nice to Albania
yeah.
because they have been wronged in ways that are not fair, even though
Yeah.
they didn't sell us their air force.
I was gonna say, so Ramshackle, just I want you to keep in mind whatever you were told of the country from your sister's tour. Same thing to you, Quinn, about the people you know from there. Like, just keep that in mind as Lady Red talks about the Mister.
So as I start talking about this, the first thing that I want to do is for any of you who enjoy listening to nonsense about writing, which I'm going to guess is the 42 of you that are here, thank you for being here, seeing as you put up with my nonsense and just going on and on and on. But there is a YouTube channel called Crimson Rogue, spelt with a K. He discusses books. He's a far more intelligent man than I am an intelligent woman. He really knows what he's talking about, and he's very engaging, and I love his content. So if you want to hear about these terrible books in more detail, go to Crimson Rogue's YouTube channel. You'll have a lovely time. He's fantastic, and he has wonderful hair. And he is where I've gotten...
He does
have wonderful hair. And he's where I've gotten some of my bad books I've read to my book club from, and he's also how I know some of what I know about the Mr. and the Mrs. So E.L. James wanted to write the Mr. before 50 Shades. She did 50 Shades, she did that series, she's now got a publishing agent, she's very happy with this, and they're happy with her because it's bringing in lots of money. So they pay for her to go off to Albania to do a research tour. And if we were to believe what E.L. James has to say about Albania, they are still in the first 5 years post-communism. They are a country of misogynists that beat their women and have no idea what technology is.
Yeah, no, that about sums it up.
I would love to do some dramatic readings of books and things to you guys. The problem, of course, we run into is copyright law. We're fine to talk about these things, but I don't think I could get away with reading even with the commentary that I put on top of things like Twilight. I don't think I could get away with doing that, which is a shame. Yeah, but well, according to E.L. James, Albania probably doesn't have an air force in her world. You've been recommended Crimson Rogue's Empress Teresa series. Yes, you should watch that. Empress Teresa is a time. Yes, Top Gear gave a country a better and more flattering representation. So, the Mister. The story of the Mister is about an Albanian woman who doesn't want to marry her abusive fiancé that she has been betrothed to by her family because Albania's that backwards. And so she runs away from him and gets sex trafficked to the UK, escapes the sex traffickers, becomes a cleaning lady under the radar, and ends up working for a member of the aristocracy, cleaning his apartment up in London or whatever. The two of them meet. He's a complete playboy, but once he meets her, he knows that she's the one, and it's the torrid story of how these two people from two different worlds will get together, and there's supposed to be this overarching, will they, won't they, and oh god, what if her husband her husband-to-be comes back. And unfortunately, Crimson Rogue described it very accurately as erotic boredom.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, E.L. James commits every sin that Twilight committed, only worse, and in stereo with the Mister. The characters do not really have plot arcs. I suppose to a degree, the main male lead kind of does, because he goes from being a complete playboy to being very much a wife man with regards to this person. But it doesn't happen in a compelling way, and it's very hard to like the characters. Maximilian Trevelyan, I think is his name, and he's become the new Earl of whatever made-up duchy E.L. James decided on, because his brother has just died, and he's already sleeping with his brother's wife.
I'm just going through the Pistol, the Mister who moistens things, Winter Ice trying not to snort coffee and spit take.
Yeah, it is like an 80s porno with extra steps and drama, except the drama has no stakes or meaning and is very boring, and it's it's just Maximilian Trevelyan probably sounds familiar because I think the Trevelyans are distant relatives of the Greys from the 50 Shades of Grey series. Or maybe you've heard about this character before or something. I'm not going to pretend I have encyclopedic knowledge of this.
Isn't Trevelyan the last name of Sean Bean's character from GoldenEye?
Yeah, I might be mixing things up then. That's how much the Mister means to me. Or they've got the same name.
Yeah.
But it is a very boring book, and the reason it's boring is because it commits a romance sin. And it's why I wanted to talk about rotten romance in general.
Alec Trevelyan is.
Then I probably just borrowed a far better name. That's probably what's happened. Because, oh God, the Mister is boring. What happens with it is these two characters get put together by circumstances that do not make sense if you have two brain cells to rub together. If you are a peer in the UK, there is no way you have an unregistered cleaning lady who does not have proper documentation coming in to clean your house. It just does not happen. The people that you would have coming in are going to have had background checks. So she wouldn't be there in the first place. This is before we get into all of the other problems that go on with the book that are just not believable. But these two people get thrown together by contrived circumstance. The focus is on all the wrong things. And with the Mister, the other big sin that E.L. James commits that's a personal sin is she clearly heard all of the criticism from 50 Shades where it was, this is an abusive relationship, consent is not taken into account, and that's a really important thing, because she goes too far the other way with trying to imply that Maximilian is all about getting consent and he drinks that respects women juice, except he doesn't, because although she has these moments where she over focuses on trying to make it look like he wants to get consent from his partners, in the moments where it's not based in the bedroom, you see what his true attitude towards women is. And I do feel like E.L. James is one of these people who really does have genuine internalized misogyny that she doesn't realize she has and should probably go to therapy about. Because she has a very unnatural hatred for blonde-haired women and just women in general. And it's worrying. And that comes out in her writing and makes it a terrible book.
It doesn't help that the seeking of consent is framed in such a way that the dude always comes across as just being manipulative instead of seeking consent.
Yes, there is always that sort of little degree of manipulation that's there, but you see it much more strongly in the interactions that are not based in the bedroom. At one point, to escape from the sex traffickers that are catching up with Alessa Demarquis, the Albanian girl, he just takes her down to Cornwall to his estate down there for several days. And that's supposed to be a romantic thing. So he's run off with her to an estate in the countryside where nobody knows where she is. She doesn't have any connections in the country. It's kidnapping by any other name. It's very manipulative. The fact that she just goes with him, and as a sex trafficking victim, the message it sends is terrible. It's absolutely terrifying. Yes, Pistol, I agree. It would have been much better if it had been that kind of book. Yes, and the predatory aspect in romance novels has become epidemic. And unfortunately, I think this sort of upsurge we've seen it, because it's always been there. Let's not pretend it hasn't been there. If we go back in time to the pulp novel of the 60s and 70s, particularly aimed at the time, necessarily underground lesbian and gay communities, and you look at those books, all of those books, the trope with those is bury your gays. You can only tell stories about gay people if they die at the end, or something bad happens and has this overarching moral of, and isn't it a tragedy that they're gay? So you've always sort of had this undercurrent of predatory aspects and negative aspects in a lot of romance stories, but the release of Twilight and then the success of 50 Shades really did see an upswell that's led us to books that are far worse than these. So you've got The Mister and then The Misses, the sequel, that sort of really continue to push this unhealthy relationship nonsense in different ways. But then you've got spawn-off books like 365 Days, which are way worse. There's been
I still think that's a freaking Kingdom Hearts
No,
title.
that would be 368 over 2. That's still a different thing. You then had books coming out. You've completely derailed where I was going. I've forgotten the book I was going to mention.
Sorry.
We had 365 Days. Oh, the upsurge in student-teacher romance books, which I find very concerning. Particularly when these books sometimes go international, and that can cause some real issues, because I'm not on board with anybody who's in a position of power with somebody who's newly turned legal in whatever country they're in being an okay thing, but there's something inherently worse about it when you are talking about a teacher and a 16-year-old, depending on what state or country that you're in. I mean, you're just making it worse, when really we shouldn't be trying to say that this is a good thing in the first place. I'm trying to remember the name of the book, but there's one that's a college romance where the male character and the female character are obsessed with Pride and Prejudice. I think, is it after the series? It started out as a Wattpad series of fanfics, well, not fanfics, but a Wattpad series of stories, and then got picked up. And it's very clear the author doesn't understand the story of Pride and Prejudice, and who is prideful and who is prejudicial in that story, and what the morals you're supposed to learn from it are. Romance novels should not include actual criminal acts. There are some that get quite fun and you can have a good time with, like, for example, there is a series of books out there, the Mafia Quintet, I think it's called, where the male lead in each book is a member of a different country's mafia. So you've got the Italian mafia, you've got the Irish mafia, you've got the Russian mob, and none of these characters make sense, and all of them together form the priesthood, like these sort of super assassins from each thing that all work together. And oh my god, it's terrible, and the women in it are let's just say that when they try to write the women in these stories as empowered, they are even more disempowered than the ones that aren't, which is just terrible.
No.
And those are awful. Rael brought up the Omegaverse earlier, which brings a whole new connotation of problems in, where we decide that we're just going to prey on men the same way, because why not, and throw biology out the window. And I really do think that Twilight has helped to spawn where we're at now, and the romance genre really, really concerns me. Really, really concerns me. I was going to go into a whole diatribe of the fact that we ended up with a wonderful book, and I say wonderful with full sarcasm, called Handbook for Mortals, and that was going to lead into me ranting on about Prologues, but it's already 10 to 4.
Jesus
Because this topic I have opinions on. Drink up, good idea. I will have a drink for a moment.
Meanwhile, I'm gonna check to see if the babies have... Nope, they're still in there. It's still dark. You still can't see diddly squat.
For other palate cleansers that completely take the piss and send up the romance genre, I recommend Chuck Tingle. We read Harriet Porber and the Parasaurolophus and had a wonderful time. It's a very good book. You should read it. It has sentient motorcycles in it.
The rabbit hole of what people are into is bad. Yeah. There's so much bad schlock pretending to be romance out there that...
Rail says, I'd argue Twilight is just the one that pushed through, but with the way fanfiction was, something was going to eventually. I agree, and Twilight was sort of that breakthrough book that's led to what's continued afterwards. And a lot of this, I think, as well, is tied into the decline of the publishing industry, because with the world going as digital as it has, publishing houses, especially the 6 big publishing houses, are very risk averse at this point. I have checked my posture tired German. It is terrible. And as a result, it means that publishing houses want high returns for, low risk, low effort. And that's why we're seeing so much of this stuff being pushed, is it's very easy to just put this stuff out there and somebody will buy it and pay the money for it. Picture being in the Vampire the Masquerade Requiem circles when Twilight hit. That was a rough time for my gay group. We were. And there was a supplement that came out around that time that just tackled it perfectly and allowed my play group to just move past it, which was, oh no, Twilight is a wonderful, it's a gay op that we're running. Because if people are obsessed with vampires or like that, it makes it really easy for them not to pay attention to what we're really doing. So that was what we just went with.
If it works.
The cheap romance is the OP isekai of literature. It to a degree, it can be. One of these weeks, I will probably do a rant on isekais and why there's very few out there that are actually worth your time and attention, because I have opinions, but I'm not going to go into those hot takes this week.
You have opinions. Say it ain't so.
I know, right? I wonder why we call this stream Red's Writing Rants.
I would love for you to actually follow up on this by breaking out your copy of Handbook for Mortals and just giving a couple notes, just a couple excerpts.
I could probably do that. Give me just a moment. I will go and find my copy.
Just if nothing else, for the prologue bit, breaking that bad boy out so that you can then lean into, this is what a prologue is. This is why this prologue sucks.
If I can find my books and get logged in and do that thing, I will do so. Give me just a minute. I've got to remember how to get to it.
I wasn't necessarily meaning today.
Not today. Maybe do it another time.
That's up to you. It's whether or not you want to try and lean into the bit, or commit to the bit, or go to Shoal. Your pick.
What do you want to do, chat? Do you want to have some more absolute nonsense from terrible romance books, or do we want to push into Shoal? What do you guys want to do? World building, nonsense. I think we're going to need to do a poll.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you want to set the poll up while I look for the book?
Yes. I am on it.
Can I just have access to my library, please? My books, there they are. I think it's in here. There it is.
All right. I'm going to throw this poll up for 2 minutes. 100 goob for additional votes for those of you who are inclined to do such things. Does that sound good to you, my dear?
Sure.
All right. There you go.
There we go. Got the book up.
Convergent mimetic evolution. Now that's an idea. Does romance suffer from convergent mimetic evolution? Rail is volunteering himself as tribute for the isekai discussion.
We can probably set that up.
A very bad romance media that took Shoal by storm and everyone is annoyed by it. Vampire Sparkle Cry. No! No, Heckmenistan. No! Saris, you're gonna have to give me a minute. Once the poll is complete, it's relatively even at this juncture. There is definitely goob at play here.
Of course there is.
Oh, world building's taken off. That's not me clicking, that's her.
That is Saris.
Oh, that's
Sarah scratching at the door. Alternately, you are hearing my mechanical keyboard going at hyper speed.
Samurai, good luck. Well, if nothing else, it speaks
while
volumes
we wait
about
for
what
this to
people
finish,
think about your setting.
Yes,
because
well,
right
it's
now,
not my setting, it's our setting. And I did spend some time on it this week. For those of you who didn't see in the auxiliary dedicated channel for Shoal, I did write up a lot of the ideas we discussed last week. I did about 4,500 odd words on writing up a lot of the animals, terrestrial animals that we came up with, and have made that available so you guys can see it. There's still more to go in. There's always going to be more to go in, and we can always add to it. But I had a lot of fun with that. That was about 2 days of writing. Okay, so we're going to go straight into world building. We will have to talk about Putrid Prologues and Handbook for Mortals another time. But I would like to just give you guys a very quick glimpse of what that stream is going to be like when it happens by reading you the dedication for Handbook for Mortals. Ladies and gentlemen, buckle your fuckles. It's only a sentence, but it's going to hurt. I hope you are ready. The dedication for Handbook for Mortals, which is a love story in the vein of Twilight, reads as follows. This book is dedicated to the granddaughters of the witches you could not burn, and for all those who believe in magic. I would like you to keep that in mind for the next time we talk about this nonsense. It only gets worse from there. Jesus Christ, correct. Wretches, yeah, also correct. 10 out of 10 great literature. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'll stamp a witch somewhere on the Centurion. Good idea. And if you think that the dedication is bad, the foreword is something that's worth talking about. The thank yous at the end are out of this world. The stuff that happens during the book, we will have a conversation when it is time to discuss that book. Do they weigh as much as a duck? We never find out, but there are an unfortunate number of roses that are abused through the course of this story. And it's just terrible. It is just uniquely terrible and commits every romance sin on the planet.
Considering your love of roses and a flower, yeah, no wonder you have opinions.
Right. We'll do that, though, another week. We've managed to go through an entire hour of me being upset by the fact that Twilight exists. 20 years past when that was a relevant topic. We're going to move on to world building. We've got quite a few of you here this week, and I'm going to guess that some of you didn't get to see the absolutely awesome animation that Ninja Turtle put together. So what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you guys, is take 3 minutes, play that animation, and then we'll move into the actual world building, and that'll give me a chance to have a drink. Is that okay? Okay, let me play the thing. Scroll down. Here it is. Okay, let's turn this on. Boop.
Hello everyone, and welcome to a partial simulation of the MERN system. We have the inner planets here doing their thing, orbiting. We have Luastra also doing its thing and orbiting. And we have its mini moons doing their thing and all orbiting as well. How crazy is that? We zoom into Luastra, we can see it has many moons. We can see Mole here doing its best. It's my favorite, to be honest. Let's see. Mole has a tidal stress of 10 to the 12. I saw there for a split second. That's pretty spicy. For reference, Earth is 10 to the 9. So, you know, a bit spicy on the tidal stress. But hey, that's fine. We also have Shoal, a habitable planet that is orbiting Luastra, which is orbiting MERN. Because it is orbiting two different things, there's a couple weird things that happen to this. For one, your surface temperatures rise and fall quite a bit. Mostly because if you look at the energy coming in, it is going to vary depending on how close Shoal is to the sun. Which is also why Shoal orbits out of plane with Luastra. If it orbited perfectly in plane, the temperature swings would be even more extreme than they currently are. That means half the year, Shoal is getting quite warm. Well, relatively speaking. And then for the other half of the year, Shoal gets cold. A more extreme summer and winter than what we would have. We can see, looking up here, that we have liquid water, at least around the equator. The poles, yeah, it's all frozen water, but you have liquid water on the surface around the equator. Speaking of the tides, tidal stress magnitude is 10 to the 10 normally. So I have seen it spike up to 10 to the 11 briefly. So that means on average, there we go, 10 to the 11. On average, the tides on Shoal are about an order of magnitude higher than they are on Earth. And for some time, they are 2 orders of magnitude higher than they are on Earth. So, it's probably better to be an aquatic species on Shoal.
Okay, so that was the wonderful animation that was put together by Ninja Turtle, throwing that through Universe Sandbox, if I remember correctly. And I did take a look to have a look at what an order of magnitude higher for tides would mean for Shoal. And on Earth, it would mean that the waves that we get on the shore would be about 6 meters taller than they currently are. On Shoal, it's probably going to be a little bit higher than that, seeing as there's less land to sort of get in the way and slow that down. There's only 2 seasons. There's seasons on Shoal are complicated, and I do have a write-up on that. Let me move over to this. If I make that smaller, does that still behave itself on stream? And no, it changes things. Gosh darn it. What a pain. Let me put that back how it was. And a bit more. Okay. That can hang out at that size. I will want to go to the seasons. Here we go. So I'll do a quick read through of the season stuff because we solved this a couple of weeks ago. This made all of our brain melts while we were trying to deal with this. Lichter, yes, we do have heavy erosion, but this is a very volcanically active world, and we've got basically 2 huge land masses and 2 polar land masses. Everything else erodes very, very quickly.
The other thing to keep in mind is that most of the setting is undersea.
Yes, and there are probably no really tall mountains for the exact reasons that you're talking about. But right, the seasons. Just like a year is a complex concept for Shoal, we figured out that the way that you'd have to measure a year on Shoal would be an orbit around Luastra, its host planet, would be a close year, and then the full orbit of the gas giant around the star would be what we call a grand year, and there are 5 close years to a grand year. That solves that calendar issue. So, just as a year is a complex concept for Shoal, as well as months and even days, the seasons too are an abstraction from the Earth standard. While on other worlds, seasons are defined by axial rotation around a central star and experienced due to changes in light exposure and climate conditions from this, Shoal has other concerns. Stellar light is often in flux due to Shoal's complex orbit, but radiation from its host planet instead comes into place to affect the climate of Shoal, especially during extended and regular meteor showers. Thus, Shoal does not have a standard concept of summer heat or winter chill. Temperature can change for other reasons, and the seasons it does experience are affected not just by stellar light, but also regular eclipse and an orbit speed determined by its host planet. The result is that Shoal does not measure its seasons based on its own axial rotation, but instead by progress through a close year around Luastra. Seasonal bands. There are 2 seasonal bands which affect all of Shoal at the same time, caused by the gravitational pull of Luastra. As Shoal circles its gas giant, there are times it's behind the planet and thus pulled through space faster. Conversely, at the other end of the close year, it is ahead of Luastra and thus slowed by the gravity of its lagging giant companion. These bands are evident to the people of Shoal by how fast the stars are moving across the heavens and in which direction, as sometimes the stars will appear to move in reverse. As a result, the large seasonal bands are split into the following. Presto seasonal band, when Shoal is lagging behind Luastra and pulled faster through its orbit, the stars go faster. And Largo seasonal band, when Shoal is ahead of Luastra and its orbit is slowed by the gravitational pull. The sky seems to move slower as a result. We then have a second type of season, light seasons. As with other planets, light does play a role for Shoal, whether it's direct light from the star Mern or reflected indirect light bounced off of Luastra as Shoal moves into eclipse. These light-based seasons can happen within both of the above bands. So we have lambent season, when direct light from Mern is felt and reflected off Luastra, so it lights up much of Shoal, occurs once per close year. Gloam season, when only indirect light off Luastra is felt as Shoal passes towards or out of eclipse. This happens twice per close year, meaning that the gloam season may be in wax or wane. A waning gloam follows a lambent season, while a waxing gloam follows a tenebrous season. Tenebrous season is when there's no light from Mern and Shoal is in full eclipse behind Luastra. This occurs once per close year. There's also a tertiary season, a third type. Radiation has a large effect on Shoal, with many life forms adapted to utilise and survive such rays. Shoal's orbit periodically takes it out into the rings of Lua, the debris range around the gas giant, which also houses much of the radiation held in place by Luastra's immense gravity. This causes a tertiary season that can overlap with any of the above, characterised by meteor falls, radiation spikes, which cause blooms in the oceans, and a distinct effect on agriculture. To the locals, this seasonal effect is known as skyfall and overlays other areas of the seasonal calendar as appropriate. So how does that look in use? All of this is to say, seasons are discussed as a mixture of elements by the people of Shoal as it affects their world and circumstances. Many are the children of Shoal who look forward to a presto waning gloam when the stars race across the sky and traditional scary stories are told around sumptuous feasts. So much the better if skyfall coincides and meteors light up the oncoming long dark as a sign of fortune ahead. So that's what we wrote up about that, but what we do know is that when we are in a tenebrous season, it's going to be colder than when we're in a lambent season, which would be the equivalent of sort of summer and winter. But it's pretty much going to be like planet-wide because of how all of this orbiting nonsense works. Right, let me come and see what you guys have had to say while I was wittering on there. Yeah, serious volcanism, absolutely. Volcanism is fun. Dry land would be a very exotic area for the merfolk of Shoal. Yes, we did a load of work last week. You were here for it, Tired German, where we were talking about some of the land species, and I really liked some of the ideas we came up there. Are there electrical storms, or is the planet further enough not to cause magnetic interaction? I don't think we're going to go with electrical storms being a thing that we need to have a consistent worry about. I'm not saying they can never happen, but I don't want to overload the setting to the point where we can't write in it because there's too many scientific things going on. Okay, Skyfall being a season where folks favour deeper water. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Just had some British weather. So that was how we dealt with the seasons. And last week we were continuing building our ecology, which is very important for building other stuff on top. For those of you who haven't been here for previous streams, I am very much about building a setting from the ground up, not just because, one, it gives you a good solid foundation to base your facts in and a consistent storytelling mechanism so that you're not going back and trying to add in things that weren't there before and causing issues, but it also can reveal interesting story elements to talk about, and we've definitely seen that with the way that we've built this setting so far. The unique build of the seasons is going to make for some interesting stories as we've started developing some of our creatures and plants and the concept of the coral and how creatures interact with it. There's clear stories that can be told from that as well. So I find this to be a very idea-rich environment to write this way, and doing it communally, I personally feel is the best way, because all sorts of ideas come up and people bring elements that could be a problem to light that you might not have thought of, and it's just a fun time. So one of the things I wanted to do today was to take a look at the deep ocean, because every week that we've talked about this, we've quite often come back to wanting to talk about the coral and then the actual people of Shoal, which of course that's going to be one of the really interesting sections that we deal with. Last week's really interesting idea was effectively psychoactive pearls that can allow people to interface with the mecha we know that we're going to be building. So I think we need to get the deep ocean established so that maybe next week we can really hammer down how the coral works and how we build that into our mecha and into use by our species, so that hopefully in March we can start talking about what our races look like and what our cultures are going to look like, which I think we're going to have a lot of fun with. Lictor, that's a conversation that we've been having over the weeks, and the answer is going to be yes to all of those. Depending on where the different peoples live, I think will affect what they have. And that seems to be something that chat has been on board with. For sea peoples that choose to live in the more shallow oceans, which we know we've got shallow oceans, 2 weeks ago we sat down and came up with a lot of creatures for those. And I have another tired German sketch to show you guys in just a minute.
Ooh.
I think those people living in those areas would have eyes, because there's going to be enough light for enough of the year, and also bioluminescence being used, that would make sense. But I think in the deeper ocean, where that's not going to be so much of an issue, it would be entirely possible that we have either no eyes for some of the peoples that live there, or the eyes are much reduced and changed and maybe perceive in different ways. Avoid the predictable fish-shaped cars. Yeah, I don't think we'll have fish-shaped cars, but we did have that we looked at last week, and I do like this as an idea because I think biological engineering is going to be important on this setting. One of the things that Tired German sketched out for us was this wonderful manta ray transport. This isn't a mechanical vehicle. This is a bioengineered manta ray with pods that can house mer people to transport them from different areas. When we had a big discussion about that, and I think that's a really, really cool drawing, and as a living creature that's a part of the ecosystem, all used in almost the same way as a stilt strider from Morrowind. I think that's a really cool idea.
I love the silt striders.
Yes.
They're such a fun, gribbly thing.
And then we have a new Tired German sketch this week. We talked about, with our shallow oceans 2 weeks ago, the concept of a siren eel that uses coral to be able to... Oh, where did the thing go? Oh, I moved it down. There we go. That uses the coral to lure creatures in and has a very vibrant colour scheme. So he has done us a sketch of a siren eel, which I think is really, really cool, and an idea of what its average consumption would look like, and what it eats, and comparatively to a standard mer person or human. Because I think probably our sentient species are going to end up being roughly the same size. We might have a couple of foot disparity between the average Terran human and the average Shoal mer, but I'd like to keep them roughly the same size because that will solve some future story writing problems. Let's see what other notes we had come in. Have the merfolk be descendants of different species to allow the adaptation of different characteristics. That could be something we choose to go with. Yeah, and have convergent evolution. We have talked, Lictor, about echolocation. I put echolocation onto some of our terrestrial species that make use of the lakes that we wrote up last week. And again, if you want to see any of the notes that have been written up so far, keep up with where we've got to. If you head over into the auxiliary Discord, there is a Shoal thread, and there's also a Shoal announcement thread. The announcement thread has links to the in-process PDF where you can see everything we've done so far that I've had time to write up. It's all in there. I can see Puppy Cam is on the move. What are we doing? Oh, Looper wants attention. Hello, Looper. She is crying. I presume you guys can hear that.
Oh, if I go over here... Hello, Lupa.
They can hear her. She is squeaking away. She might break out her big complaints shortly, at which point everyone will hear them, because these babies got pipes. These babies have big pipes when they really want something. Undersea gigantism, I think that's definitely going to be a thing. I particularly want to explore deep sea gigantism in the polar regions, because cold areas do tend to lend towards that slower, bigger lifestyle. So I definitely want us to continue to look into that. And of course, deep sea, that makes sense as well. One thing we did last week as well was we came up with our first sort of detailed Leviathan. If I bring that up. Which was entirely, it helps if I bring it up on the right side of the screen, there we go, which was entirely because of Ninja Turtle and Corbin. We invented underwater Valstrax, for anybody who's familiar with the Monster Hunter series.
God, yes, we did.
Yes, a biologically engineered accident that uses super cavitation to hunt. There's only the one of it. It's an ambush predator, and it's terrifying. So we came up with that. We know we have a hermit crab mech Leviathan, where a hermit crab moved into one of the mechs and is synced with it. So that'll be fun when we detail him out. But I would like for us to spend some time today looking at our deep sea creatures. Now, if I bring up on this side of my screen, I can look at... Oh, no, I don't want that big, thank you. I can look at what we initially talked about, and perhaps we can start building our food web for the deep ocean today. So one of the things that I was considering with the deep ocean, and I'd love to see what you guys think about this, is I do feel like we are going to need to think about the coral a little bit here. For those of you who aren't familiar with the setting, we've got normal corals and sponges and the like. We also have coral spelt with an H, as in sort of coral, and that's the psionically active stuff, which is going to be the sort of unique special thing to this setting. I feel like the shallow waters should have some corals, but the big coral beds that are drawn from to grow the Titan mechs that are going to be our unique thing in this setting are probably going to be deep ocean beds, and very in tune with the core of the planet and the way that it moves, considering that we know that the people of Shoal measure a standard day, a single axial rotation, based on the song of the coral that's just natively in the background. So if you guys have any thoughts on what deep sea species you want to have in here, what we feel that we should definitely have, throw them at me. When we originally talked about this, we talked about deep ocean life coming with a degree of calm stability away from the breaking waves of the surface, so we can be a bit more consistent perhaps with some of our life forms and how they manage in the ecosystem. We know that it's going to be cold and we've got a lot of pressure down there, so I imagine that we're going to be looking at the different ways that we manage pressure. We talked about, we might not want eyes. We're going to use a lot of echolocation, probably a lot of sound. Bioluminescence will become very important for what creatures do have a light sensitivity. And probably a lot of large, slow to mature and slow to age life forms. Let's see what chat's got coming in. In what depth would coral prefer to grow? 4 stories deep, 8 to 12. I feel like we should have coral at sort of every level, but the deeper down you go and the more adapted it is, the longer it takes that coral to develop, but perhaps the stronger the psionic energy is as a result.
It helps if I actually am unmuted.
That
There's
does
also
help.
the possibility so I'm gonna preface this with, I'm not a marine biologist, but I would imagine that there are different species of coral real world, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. But coral in the real world doesn't tend to go as deep as I'm thinking it will do on this planet.
Yeah, well, what I'm thinking is that there be different species of, and it may be that they have different qualities, or at the very least, some are considered higher quality for purposes of construction, vice others. Like the deep sea stuff is harder to harvest and it takes longer to grow, but tends to be more potent in the construction of mechs and
basically where my
systems.
thoughts were, yes. Rails made a comment that I'm going to respond to. No, we haven't done a oceanographic cross-section as yet. We haven't gone to quite that level of depth. But for the for Rails comment, I'm just imagining what it would do to your mentality to always have an accurate clock as background noise. I don't think it's going to be too horrendously different to what it's like for us, because humanity's always been on Earth where we have the consistent cycle of day and night that has sort of meted out our understanding of a day and the passing of time. Obviously, we've adjusted our calendar over time to account for that, and lunar cycles and all the extra stuff that goes in. But I imagine it would be similar to that. As the song sort of swells and ebbs, that's your sort of day-night consistency that we have from natural light on our world.
Lichter, a thought. You're talking about a short-range, short-wave emitting beastie, multi-limbed. What about something that emits the waves in the sense that, so, like, a sonar ping from a submarine is harmful at close range to living things, and, you know, potentially, if even at some distance, disorienting. What about something that actively stuns or disorients with its, with the pulses that it emits? A deep ocean magpie, Quinn? That sounds fun. The twitchy little thing.
Ceres has laid her ear on my hand and she is scorching hot. Just catching up on chat at the moment. Like how earth trees grow in different elevations, with deeper coral growing slower but with hardier qualities. Yes, that's a good way of putting it, Tired German. I want a deep ocean magpie that steals coral and hoards it because it likes a nest that sings to it. It's also... That's a really good idea. Maybe it takes, sort of young, budding... Oh, did I? I wonder why. Is it working again?
Yeah,
Okay.
the moment you started going into your I like that, you just cut out.
Clearly Twitch doesn't want people to know what I like. I'm only allowed to rant about things I don't like. Like Twilight! I was reading what Quinless said with the idea of a sort of magpie that steals coral and makes a nest that sings. If it picks up sort of budding young coral and moves it over. That's a really cool idea. I really like that. I'm going to copy that one in for sure. Let's add that to our list. Okay, let's see what else has chat come up with. Allowing it to scan through basic foliage. Day and night is one thing. Does the choral song get down to minutes or seconds? No, I'm thinking it's much more generalized than that, Rail. It's just a sort of steady background psionic sound that or feeling that just everyone's aware of. It's just always there, and it gets stronger at one point during the day and weaker at another point during the day. So it'd be very similar to the sort of concept of day and night, but not that precise, because that would be just maddening, and I don't think I could accurately write characters that experience that and make it compelling to an audience. And of course, ultimately, we want to be able to write in this setting, so I don't think going that deep would be a good idea.
You know what I think you could describe it very similar to? In a lot of sci-fi settings, I can't really confirm or deny this from real world because I've never been on a ship underway for an extended period of time, but you'll see the description of people who are career spacers, for example, that they know something's wrong when there isn't just the ambient background hum of the vessel, the recirculation units, the air filters, and you've got the background cycles of repeating automated processes that become just kind of a comforting background noise.
And of course, that's what we've talked about with the deep corals that use the dead zone around them, where it cuts off the coral song and that can cause froth. The mental illness that we've talked about. So that will very much be part of it. Floating algae clumps that create floating microbiospheres that just travel along the current. I think that's going to be an absolute necessity to form the basis of our food web, yes. We'll definitely have stuff like that. trade networks that could establish to exchange goods from the deep depths. Yep, when we get to establishing our cultures and how the people work, definitely we're going to need to have these strong...
We have poop.
Oh no, go clean up the poop. These strong networks that allow us to move things. And of course, I think we're going to have to look into how we're going to use the land as well. I have a feeling that we're probably going to have some Mers that have traded in the water for the land. Don't worry that PupCam's gone out, by the way. It will come back up. Aiden's just stepped into the pen. It will come back up when he comes out. Being late for a meeting would be considered incredibly rude because everybody has built-in clocks. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be that precise, thankfully. Are we trying to make psychomantis shrimps? We know we have some ridiculous shrimp in the shallower waters, and shrimp do like to migrate between ocean bands in the real world, so I imagine they do that on Shoal as well.
They're sticking to my socks.
Aiden is having a terrible time with puppies stuck to his socks. Since we're in a psionic environment with deep water creatures used to trap coral as a sensory system to detect prey where there is no light, potentially, if we don't do that for some of our sort of just deep water creatures, absolutely, I think we could maybe look at that for some leviathans. Okay, algae clumps would be like warm water flows. Or shallow water creatures could hitch a ride on. Yep. Bottom feeding insectoid-esque thing that can attach and unattach itself from other similar organisms based on currently undisclosed matching protocols, creating colonies like a deep sea Portuguese man of war. That's a good idea. Let's absolutely grab that. We can think about that a bit deeper as well. Let's throw that one onto our list. All right, what else have we got, chat? A Greenland shark. They live, I think, close to 500-ish years old in real life. Could you have a species that could use psychic powers to help feed to do its normally slow movement in the deep ocean? Yep, we can absolutely have something like that. We have talked about some shallow water sharks, and if we can have shallow water sharks, we can sure as heck have some deep water sharks. Sharks are awesome. I had at one point a shark that I considered my shark. His name was Dave. He was a nurse shark, and he lived in the aquarium ride at Legoland when I worked there as a ride operator, and he was the bestest, so I'm very down for us having some sharks. I work with algal flows. Silence at sea is terrifying, yes. And I think what the seas are going to be very noisy. When we get to talking about our sentient species, I think we're going to have a really fun week where we just talk about communication, because we're going to need to think about levels of communication. The ocean is not a quiet place, and we're talking about a volcanically active world. We're talking about having large sea predators, large sea herbivores perhaps, that may have herding instincts. There's going to be a lot of infrasound used by these large animals and caused by natural geology and just the way planets work. There's going to be a lot of noise in the background. So how our sentient species communicate with each other is going to be very interesting. Grimo says, upshell feeder, a scavenger fish that travels in swarms feeding on algae carcasses and even some smaller shellfish. Thanks to their incredible bite strength, which they use to sometimes be parasitic on larger animals, regularly measuring under 1 meter in length. Yep, that sounds great. We'll throw that one in. The babies, they scream.
Yeah, I might have to leave you and go.
Go spend some time with the babies.
Yep.
Maybe let them come up to the door to play with you. Alright, let's see what else. Otters, yes, no, we have talked about otters. We actually didn't cover them much when we talked about shallow water last time. Not last time, 2 weeks ago. I do think having some otters would be an interesting thing to have. It becomes a case of where do we need to put them? Do they need to be a shallow ocean species or a deep ocean or both? Yeah, Wilf's saying in the shallows. Maybe there's a life-seeding leviathan that's dropping a relatively effective food and energy source for other things. They could accumulate pearls or something, and when it falls, it tends to bloom into micro-ecosystems. That's a really cool idea and could explain how a lot of surface nutrition perhaps gets back down to the deep ocean. Let's definitely throw that in. That's a great idea. And as ever, I will be trying to spend time over this weekend writing a lot of these ideas up to throw into the PDF before we get to next week. I do need to catch up as well on the shallow ocean. I've had a very busy couple of weeks work-wise. I will try and catch up on the shallow ocean and get that included in the PDF as well. Would a species of coral specialise in making reverberation chambers to project their notes a further distance? I think that could absolutely be a way that certain species have developed. Yep. When we start really hammering down how the coral works, I think that's a great idea to have in there. Let me pop that into the coral section of my notes, and then we can go back to deep ocean and what we're up to over here. There we go. The thought that comes to me about the psionic corals is it's like a song that rises and falls, perhaps with areas rich in corals having a resonance effect that some species can use to see. That's an interesting idea. That's a very interesting idea. Let me copy that, because if that's going to happen anywhere, I think the deep ocean would be the place where it happens, where we have these old, slow-growing, more potent, hardy corals. That's a good idea. Type of coral kelp that feeds on the enormous kinetic energy of the ocean motion, forming literal undersea walls. That's an interesting idea. I might need to do a little bit of research on how we'd make that one work. I'm going to put that a few lines down so that I remember to actually look into some research on that. But I do like that as a concept. Undershelf feeder as opposed to the overshelf feeder. Measuring at a meter or under, much like their upshelf cousin. Upshelf, that was it. They deal in many of the same things, but also have to coordinate with each other to pack hunt larger animals to scavenge. Sometimes trained to act as a sort of shepherd fish. Far more. Okay, yeah, we'll copy that down. Having the dichotomy there will be very interesting for narrative purposes. I like that one. What about a creature with a mutualistic relationship with the coral, where it both protects the coral and uses it as an amplifier radio to communicate over long distances? That's definitely something I know we've brought up when we were doing our very sort of high-scale conceptual work. It doesn't make any sense for there to be a resource that exists on a world that hasn't had that kind of symbiotic co-evolution happen. So I do think that would be something important to build in. Base coral would be cavernous with hollows as big as houses to boost their bass notes. Merfolk in the past would use the dead base corals as a shelter. Yeah, and we also talked about some of the larger sea creatures perhaps providing houses for early Mern species. So that will be very interesting. In real life, otters prefer shallows but are perfectly deep water capable. What if we had a deep sea otter species that's permanently at sea, and they use the floating algal colonies as their sort of homes where they rest, and then they hunt this sort of the shallower waters of the deep sea locations. Let me write that in. Deep ocean otters. I can spell, I swear. Never return to shore. Live on algal colonies. There we go. That will remind me what we're doing. And let's bring all of this up so you guys can see where we're at and my stuff isn't obscuring what's going on screen. Okay, let's see what else have we got. Call it the phenomenon in the forest where the predator is present but hidden, the birds and small beings suddenly shut up. The it's quiet, too quiet trope. Apply to an undersea hunter and some species of fish that evolved to detect and hide from that hunter, maybe motion-based. So to a humanoid, it looks like the whole area is floating dead around him under the sea instead of silence. That's a really good idea, yes. Prey species having reactions to predators is a very natural part of an ecosystem. Definitely something worth building in. Otterspid could be the equivalent for dogs, corgi otters. I think if we decide that we're going to have some mer species that live on surface floating colonies, having corgi otters I think would be a wonderful thing for them to have. Domesticated otters. Wouldn't work for anything that lives permanently under the water, but I think that's a great idea. whale falls in this world would be even more fascinating in this world. Whole ecosystems that spring up for potentially years and otherwise dead reaches. Yes, I really like that idea of a more surface-feeding large creature dropping nutrients down to the deep ocean that spawns. Let me copy whale falls because I know I won't remember that term, and that's a very, very useful term to look at. Where did we talk about? Here we go. Copy that word in there so I can look that up when I do the write-ups. Wild rays, the predecessors to the metro mantas, would be found in the deep sea. Yes. Okay, let's put those in then. Undomesticated wild rays. They will be down here. What else have we got, chat? Can we get giant or ridiculously tiny vacuum-like fish, kind of like a super deep-sea version of an American catfish, just with powers to control water current more as it grows until it can suck up ships at the bottom of the seas? They could be easy to eat early on and massively hard when full-sized. I don't have an issue with the concept of huge sucker fish, just how big they would have to get and what's going to work. I'm not sure, but we could certainly have a Leviathan version of one as well. Whether we want that to be a single biologically accidentally engineered one or whether we want that to be a Leviathan species is something that we can talk about. But some deep sea sucker fish I'm absolutely on board for. And I'll certainly go with big enough to cause problems. We'll just have to decide how big those problems are going to be as we balance the ecosystem, which might be something I do as I do the write-up and look at things. A large wound in the planetary crust causing an updraft of very hot mineral-rich water, causing a stained sea where russet-coloured algae and microorganisms create a viscous area of the crimson whirl. That's a really great idea. I'm going to copy that into the tides section where I'm going to sort of describe the sea out a bit more now that we're beginning to sort of really know what we want this to look like. Let me put that note up there. And then, of course, that means we can have some species that purely live in that ocean band, which will be really interesting. With the deep sea otters, they could return to shallow shore to mate and have pups, sort of like turtles. That could be a thing, or we could have maybe shallows otters that spend a lot of time at sea and then actually come on the shore for that, and keep our deep sea otters as purely ocean-based. Since the world is volcanically active, we could probably put thermal vents. Yeah, I think thermal vents are definitely going to be a thing, and that's going to feed our phytoplankton and zooplankton at the deeper depths. Suckermouth catfish IRL are only size limited by their environment. Well, that's just terrifying, Rail. I just thought of a myth around an abnormally large bottom feeder that would disrupt entire ecosystems in the deep sea, through it churning the seafloor. I think that sounds like a Leviathan to me. That would be something like akin to like the Silk Striders of Subnautica, only larger, more destructive. Let's put that in as a potential Leviathan, I think. Silt Strider like Leviathan, which churns up the seabed and disrupts the ecosystem in its immediate vicinity. Okay. Let's pop back over here. So let's have a look at some of the other ideas that we had. I know there was talk when we were originally looking at our very large scale ideas for the setting going back sort of a month or so ago. We were talking about potentially having anglerfish but with coral lures. So they're using the psionic pull to draw prey in. I think that's still a good idea. And we also talked about giant nautiloids, which provided housing to early mer peoples. We also wanted tube worms and bobbit worms. I assume those are still wanted. Let's see, what are we saying, chat? Seafloor churner would be a mythical leviathan that in old times was blamed for bad harvests. That's a good idea.
I see what you said there, Lode. That's a good 2 words put together.
Magnetically oriented sea jello that activates at different fades with the season. That could be interesting even. I'm losing the ability to words as today goes on. Giant mantis shrimp whose punch is like a fucking railgun. We have talked, in fact, about giant shrimp, yes. We do have some of those in other areas of the ecology.
Lode made the follow-up comment, Saitama shrimp.
Otter front and seal rear because no need for hind limbs, just grabby paws. Yeah, that could be an interesting idea to build into them. Bully snake, let me attach that to the sea otter concept. And what I also want to do is, I know in the shallow ocean, did we write down, I'm just going to put it on the bottom here to make sure. There we go, make sure that gets included. Alright, what else have we got? Stronger the celestial interference, the more luminescent and bright they become, but the more magnetically and electrically destructive they become. Yeah, let me copy this in, because that's a cool idea for a jellyfish. Magnetically aligned jellyfish. A Leviathan hunter, not Leviathan-sized itself, but horrifically quick and dangerous, maybe because of coral. Pack hunter, carnivore to the extreme, think killer whales. Also krill or some analogue that feed off of the environment and floating algae remnants. Yeah, I mean, krill is kind of we're definitely going to have that. It's fundamental to a food web. Those are definitely going to be a thing. I like the idea of the Leviathan hunter, though. That's really cool. And especially the fact that it's not going to be that size. We should make them more terrifying. I vote by making them much, much bigger. Giant bobbit worms.
Making them bigger and like hydras.
Do we want them to be like hydras?
Oh my god.
Do we want multi-headed bobbit worms? We can definitely have hagfish. We can definitely have hagfish.
That just leads me to wonder, what would octopi be like if their tentacles ended in mouths? Now we will get to find out.
Hagfish. Let's see, what else are we coming up? Yes, Hydra bobbit, and it sings. Does it sing with a audible tone, or does it sing with psionic choral tones? Parasitical being that bores into the hides and shells of Leviathan-sized creatures, feeding on the Leviathan itself or on the detritus that comes from the Leviathan feeding. That's absolutely a really good ecological concept. I'm going to stick that in with Leviathans because I feel like talking about it where we talk about Leviathans will be a really good idea. That will make sense in the narrative as this sort of comes together. Psionic singing. Have a good sleep, Lictor, and thank you for joining us. It sings with both so it can take prey with a false promise of safety. Oh, God. Make it an underwater boombox. What about krakens? We can potentially have some krakens. Let me write some of these ideas in. So we want multiple hydrohedras. They sing. Coral and normal singing.
That's a reasonable idea. Potentially have them be one of the innate hazards of the deeper coral fields, where
Yeah.
you go in, you start getting frothed out on the basis of there's just so much ambient noise because of how infused the local plankton population is.
Oh, we're talking about plankton?
Psychic plankton or krill.
Okay, let me catch up. We did have psychic plankton, psionic plankton in the higher strata of the ocean, so it makes sense to have them down here. Let me copy that in. Okay, so this is going to be a hazard for coral harvesting. Can cause froth. Okay. Alright, let's see what else chat has had to say. If you want to make the singing bobbit hydra worse, make it smart enough to learn and repeat the sounds. So it's going to be like a lyrebird.
Except terrifying.
Except so much more terrifying than a lyrebird.
Noises they hear. Can learn new noises.
Instead of a lyrebird, it's a lyreworm.
That's just terrifying. Something like the
Yes.
reef backs of Subnautica that ride the ocean currents in a cyclical fashion could be interesting. Huge filter feeders that support whole ecosystems and could be used as moving towns. Yep, I think that's a great idea. I'm going to stick that in the Leviathan section because I think they'll end up being that sort of size and that sort of importance. But I do think that's a good idea. Maybe have the bobbit hydras be a very cultivated creature. Oh, God. Liar or liar, both. And every time it dies, it makes 2 more. No, we're not putting the Cliff Racer mod onto Shoal. No. We do not need infinite bobbit worms. That sounds terrible. All right, let's look at some other things that we thought about. We talked about one of the things that we...
So,
Go on.
before you do, going back to a thought though, actually, considering the nature of the sounds they imitate, and considering that they are predators, they would probably be territorial, because if too many of them are imitating the same noise, it's going to be known that, yeah, no, this place is infested, and bad things happen.
Territorial. You got it. So one of the things that we talked about when we were doing our initial brainstorming, somebody suggested that we should have anaconda-like eels that are capable of wrapping titans/mechs. I think that's a good idea.
Eelnacondas?
Yeah, they probably evolved to deal with leviathans before they hit full size, but have since become a pest species for mechs. I think that's an interesting idea.
Also, Orc Slayer, that's fucking terrifying. The bobbit worm already does that. When it croaks, it becomes 2 as it splits. That's horrifying.
Yeah. There we go. They're regenerative. Okay, what else have I missed? No, I'm up to date with chat. I have caught the ideas. That's wonderful. All right, anything else that we initially talked about? We talked about lampreys that drain victims and lay eggs in the corpse. I think that's still a good idea. And we talked about a giant whale equivalent
Here's an idea.
with a killer sonar.
Silt raptors. So you were talking about how important pack hunting species are to the, local food web and ecosystem. Predators that have evolved not quite full-blown arms, but the ability to grab hold with little hands to drag prey down into the coral where they cannot swim and escape.
We talked about semi-sentient octopi that use tools. Maybe they do that.
I'm thinking something that's still fish-like, but its fins end in digits that it can use to grab and weigh down and drag the prey into. And they are like a lot of bottom fish in that... Oh, there goes the puppy cam. Thank you, Pip. I'll get that in just a second. They're like a lot of ambush fish that are camouflaged into the silt of the bottom. Or maybe they're not so much camouflaged as they're kind of like clownfish in that they lurk in the coral fields and drag prey into them. I don't know, just spitballing.
Yeah. Okay, the next will have many reasons to be constantly dinged up. Yes. One of the things we talked about last week that I think we might come back to as we get into talking about the sentient species, the mechs, etc., was the concept of when you're becoming a Titan pilot, one of your first positions will be in the mechs that are used to guard the transport routes that the rays and the like travel along. Because, yeah, sea predation is going to make for dangerous routes. You'll need to bring the cap up. There you go, perfect. Stealing the lamprey idea for future D&D campaign. Absolutely, go for it. Farm sharks that swim through farm fields. Yeah, I think domesticated sharks make a lot of sense. In the same way that, you know, herding dogs make a lot of sense on land. Farm sharks that protect.
Oh, that would make a fun
Pip's
idea
gonna pull it
for
down
the
again.
silt. Yep. That would be a fun idea for the silt raptors, is if they could be trained like hunting dogs.
Silt raptors, I'll have to get you to go through all of that again with me a bit later so I can write it down. The resulting damage reproduced soured psionic notes that the enemy's predators find unpleasant. That's an interesting idea. Since coral reefs are like ecosystems unto themselves, would they have smaller fish, ambush predators in them? We very much covered a lot of that in the shallow water segment. I just need to get that all written up. That the week that we did that, I just did not have time to write, but I will catch up and cover that stuff that we discussed a couple of weeks ago. The lyre worm reproduces when one of its heads gets too big enough, it falls off and swims away. Oh god, that's horrifying, bully snake. I read the other day about the fairy wasp, a parasitic wasp that can swim underwater for days to find prey to lay its eggs in. Okay,
I'm sorry.
that's horrifying.
I just got back. Fucking what? Fucking what?
I just read what chat tells me. I don't think that would necessarily be a deep ocean creature, but I'm absolutely going to throw that into the shallow ocean section. Because, oh god, how horrifying. Alright, what else have we got? Let's wrap up what we've got, because we are heading towards the end of my time slot, and we don't want to run over by too much. Packs under shelfers, octopus and sharks. Sharks. Maybe Naga, like wow, lower snake, or moray bottles with arms and the upper torso, heads vaguely humanoid. Quinless, would you want those to be a sort of sentient mer people that we come up with, or would you like them to be non-sentient with that kind of body plan? That could cause some confusion, which would be interesting.
Eels with arms. I mean, that would be akin to what I was thinking just a few minutes ago.
Yeah. Would ranching, herding be a big industry in the deep seas? Like there's a fish that produces thick scales that can be used for tools or clothing. Yeah, I think so. Once we know, so you know, we've got the write-up of what our creatures are, which we can always add to as we start developing the sentient species. I did invent some stuff on land that we didn't actually talk about last week. That could be herding creatures that would be farmed on land, but we can always add to stuff as we need to justify. Talking about land sharks not in the ocean. Okay. We will have to have a look at that. I do remember street sharks. That was a very 90s creation. About the most 90s it was possible to be. Once we decide what agriculture looks like on the land, perhaps we'll add in some more species and it will be something similar to that. But I effectively came up with blubber sheep. As one of the terrestrial species. And again, the terrestrial stuff, most of it has been written up. It's available on the Discord. If you head into the Orcs Discord and look for the Shoal channel in the writing section, you can see everything that's been written up so far. I do still have some more to add in, but there is stuff there. Okay, the most 90s show is Reboot. Fair enough. Need a plant to make lots of nets out of for farming. Fences are hard underwater. I agree, bully snake. The blubber sheep we also decided would roll like the... was it the... Yeah, I'm calling them blubber sheep, but they're not really sheep. But yeah, they would roll. No, I didn't put that on the sheep. I didn't put the rolling on the sheep. I put the rolling on the jackalopes. They roll to get away from predators. Maybe a natural predator of mermaids, as in they evolved hands so they could better hunt them. Mimicry. They could be conscious but very primitive. Okay. Let's put that in. And that will probably be our last one to add in for this week. And I will try to get all of this written up by next week. Naga-like species with hands they use to hunt. There we go. Now I will remember what we were talking about. All right, we are at 5 p.m., which is technically the end of my slot. To the best of my knowledge, Tex and Depp will be here at hour for more of their shenanigans. I haven't heard anything to the contrary. So roll to get away from predators, underwater conchu. We talked about Katamari urchins that rolled away from things and picked things up. Yes, Tep and Dex. Tep and Dex will be here later. Buy one, get one free. Possibly comes with a side of smooth sipping engine degreaser. Who knows?
Apple flavored. Meanwhile, I'm looking at the puppy cam and seeing the chaos that has been wrought.
Yes, they have dragged all of the blankets all over the place. I'm really glad you were
Emptied their
able to
water
join
dish
us,
everywhere.
Orc Slayers, and you came up with some very helpful ideas that we've added in. If you can't make streams, but you still want to know what's going on, and you want to be able to talk about things you think should be there, or problems that you spot, the Shoal channel over in the Orcs is the best place to get hold of me. Please feel free to @ me if I haven't responded or you desperately want me to see something. I do not mind people @ing me. It will get my attention way quicker. And yeah, we're going to continue building this thing and see where we get to. Deep sea horror is wonderful. If I ever have a week where I'm feeling a bit under the weather, we'll probably play Subnautica or Below Zero and go and play an underwater horror game, because why not? Thank you all for being here. I know this is a bit of a weird time slot on a Friday afternoon, and there are 46 of you here listening to this wittering, which I very much appreciate, especially on Valentine's Day, and as hopefully a nice start to your weekend. I hope everybody will have a pleasing one, spend plenty of time relaxing, doing the things that you love and want to do, and yeah, we will have Tex and Depp here a bit later on. Yes.
Orcslayer, that I think is one of the biggest goals, is to help anybody who comes in, not only to come and create the setting collectively, but to just inspire others to make stuff. So if this is helping you create your own world building tools,
then that's great. Writing,
hell yeah.
Writing is my first passion. I'm known for my artwork, but writing is the creative outlet that I value the most, that I love the most. I've been writing consistently since I was about 12 years old. It's how I met Aiden and most of my close friends. And we have wonderful artists who stream on WBPL 76 as is. So I thought we might do sort of, writing stuff to make sure that area of creativity gets covered as well. And you guys have brilliant ideas. So I really, really value the ability to be able to sit and just talk writing for a couple of hours every week with you all. So once again, thank you for being here. Have a lovely weekend. Enjoy whatever Tex and Depp get up to later. And yeah, I will see you guys next time and over in the Discord. Anything else you want to say, Aiden?
No, I think you about summed it up. Hang tight, enjoy the next show, and thank you all for coming out.
We will catch you next time.